Hello, y'all. I just wanted to make a video for you. I wasn't able to get to completing the square today in class, so I wanted to make sure that you had a video to help you with this. Um, Completing the square is another um, method that we have for solving a quadratic equation. I'm going to start with the when to use this process. Completing the square is a great option when you have x squared. It's best when you have an a value of 1. So when it's just an x squared without any other number in front of it. Um, and you have a bx term with b, where b is an even number. So let me um, rewrite this, where b is an even number. So if you have an x squared and an even number times x, and those are you have the both of those terms, completing the square can be a great option. And so the process for completing the square um, is the first thing that you want to do is we're going to write our equation as x squared plus bx. And then instead of having plus c equals 0, I want you to move the c to the other side. Um, and I always leave myself room to cheat here, is what I call it, between the x term and the equals sign. I leave a bit of space there just to help kind of lead you to where you're going next. But the biggest thing is that you want to subtract that c over to the other side. And so you have the x squared and the x terms on one side and the number on the other side. And then once you have it in that form, I want you to calculate b over 2 squared and add this number to both sides. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is we're engineering the left side of the equation to factor the way that we want it. And the way that we're going to do that is by adding the correct number to both sides. The number that you're going to add to both sides is half of b squared. So this b over 2 squared, this is what we are adding to both sides here. And then once you add b over 2 to both sides, I want you to factor the left side. Um, so we'll start by actually working this out with the AC method when we first start, but it's always going to factor into x plus b over 2, that whole quantity squared. The left side will always factor into this. Whatever b over 2 is, that's the number that's going to go right here. It's always going to factor into that, and you'll see why when we do a couple of examples. But basically, we're engineering the left side to factor that way, and we'll have a perfect square. That's why we call this completing the square, is because we're adding something to both sides to have a perfect square on the left side. We're forcing it to factor that way. And then once you do that and you have a perfect square on the one side, I want you to take the square root of both sides. When you do that, don't forget plus and minus. Keep kind of reminding that and kind of poking. Anytime you take the square root of both sides, don't forget your plus and minus. And then the last thing I want you to do is continue to solve for x. And then that's going to be it. So let's actually work through one of these. Okay, so let's do number 1 here. So x squared plus 4x minus 1. Again, we're going to keep the x squared and the 4x on one side and move that c value to the other side. So we'll have x squared plus 4x equals 1. I'm going to add the 1 to both sides to move it over, and I'm going to give myself room. I call it room to cheat here. Okay, so we have this in the right format, and now we need to calculate b over 2 squared. So we're going to calculate this number right here that we have to add to both sides. So b over 2 squared. Okay, our b value here is 4. So we're going to have 4 over 2 squared. And 4 divided by 2 is 2 squared, which is going to be 4. So my b over 2 squared is 4. And I'm going to add this number to both sides. So once I have it, I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to add 4 to both sides. Technically, I'm not changing the equation at all because I'm adding the same number to both sides. I'm not changing the solutions at all. I'm just changing the way that this looks. Okay, so once I have that plus 4 on both sides, I'm going to rewrite this. So I've got x squared plus 4x plus 4 equaling 5. Now I want to factor this left-hand side. So a times c is 1 times 4, which is 4. So I need two numbers that are going to multiply to 4 and add to my b value, which is 4. The two numbers that multiply to 4 and add to 4 are 2 and 2. So if I use those two numbers and I split my middle term, I'm going to have x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4 equaling 5. And chop this in half. We'll have x times x plus 2 over here. On my right-hand side, I'll take a 2 out of everything. So 2 times x plus 2 over here. And I have something that matches. And so I have x plus 2. If I factor that out of everything, I have x plus 2 here equaling 5. And notice since I have x plus 2 times itself, I can write that as x plus 2 squared equaling 5. Okay, so once I have that, now I can take the square root of both sides. So I can take square root here and the square root here, and I get x plus 2 is equal to, don't forget your plus and minus, the square root of 5. And now I just have to subtract 2 from both sides to get to x. So I've got negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 5. So we can write our answer this way, negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 5. And notice this is actually represents two numbers, negative 2 plus the square root of 5 and negative 2 minus the square root of 5. I just want to kind of get your brain used to seeing that and separating it into two values. This actually represents 1, 2 different values. And those are our solutions. So that's how completing the square works. You're going to leave yourself room to cheat and calculate what number you're going to add to both sides in order to kind of make this look the way that it should. And I also want to kind of point out here, I'm going to switch to green. Notice that b over 2 was 2. And notice that when we factored all of this out, this factored into x plus 2 squared. So I just wanted to point out this left side did in fact factor into x plus b over 2, that whole quantity squared. I just wanted to point that out. It's always going to work that way. If you can't remember what that looks like, just do the AC method and it'll come out. But the more that you do this, you might be able to start kind of seeing the way that should factor, and it'll factor a little quicker for you. Okay, so let's try number 2 next. We'll try a couple more examples here. So first of all, we need to put this in the right form. So I need the t squared and the t on the same side, and I need the number on the other side. I like to keep the t squared positive because otherwise my brain has a really hard time factoring with a negative in front of that. So I'm going to subtract the 8t from both sides, and I'm going to add that 2 then to the other side. So I'm going to have t squared minus 8t, and that's going to be equal to 2 on the other side. And I left myself room to cheat here because we need to figure out what number is going to go there. So in order to figure that out, the number that we're going to add there is going to be b over 2 squared. My b value here is negative 8. So I will have negative 8 over 2 squared. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. And when I square negative 4, I get positive 16. So I'm going to add positive 16 to both sides. So I'm going to do plus 16 here, plus 16 here. And now to rewrite this, I have t squared. Oops, that should be a minus. Sorry about that. T squared minus 8t plus 16 equals 18. And so now to factor this left-hand side, a times c is positive 16. So I need two numbers that multiply to 16, and they have to add to negative 8. Two numbers that multiply to positive 16 and add to negative 8 are going to be negative 4 and negative 4. So we will do t squared. I'm going to split this middle term into minus 4t minus 4t. Chop it up and factor. So t times t minus 4. And then negative 4 will come out here. So that's t minus 4. And I have a common factor here, so if I factor that out, I get t minus 4 times t minus 4 equals 18. And notice this factors into t minus 4 squared. So we'll pause here for a minute if you need to catch up with the factoring. Again, notice that this factored into t minus, or sorry, actually it's t plus b over 2 squared. My b over 2 here is negative 4. This factored into t plus negative 4, that quantity squared. So whatever number you get inside this b over 2, that's the number that you're going to put in here when you factor it. It's always going to work like that. That's kind of how this is engineered. From here, you'll take the square root of both sides, and you'll get t minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 18. Again, you can break that down into its prime factorization. When you do that, the square root of 18 is going to be 3 times the square root of 2. And we'll add that 4 to both sides to solve this, and we get 4 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 2. All right. All right, let's try one more. We'll do number 3. Don't worry about number 4 here. We won't have to worry about that in this class. And I think it's going to be more confusing than it's worth. So we're not going to bother with number 4. Let's just work on number 3 here. And hopefully you will have the hang of completing the square. So again, I'm going to organize this. I'm going to put n squared plus 14n. Leave myself room to cheat here, and I'm going to add the 3 to both sides, so I'll have a positive 3 on the other side. Now, from here, I need to figure out what b over 2 squared is. That's what we're going to add to both sides. My b value is 14 over 2 squared. That's going to be 7 squared, which is positive 49. So that's the number we're going to add to both sides. I'll come up here and add 49 to both sides. So now what I have is n squared plus 14n plus 49, and that's going to equal 52 on the other side. Now we need to factor this left side, and notice b over 2 here was 7. And hopefully if you've been picking up on the patterns here, this is going to factor into n plus b over 2, which is 7, that quantity squared. If you're not seeing this, or if your brain is just like, nope, then go ahead and do a times c is 49. Find your two numbers that multiply to 49 and add to 14. And then go ahead and factor everything out with the AC method. Don't take shortcuts if you don't know where they go, because you're probably going to get lost. Go ahead and just take the long way. There's no shame in that. But if you see the shortcut here, I'm also okay with you using it. So this left side is going to factor into n plus b over 2, which is 7, that quantity squared, and I'm still going to have that 52 on the left, on the right hand side. From here, I'll take the square root of both sides, and I get n plus 7 left here, equaling plus or minus the square root of 52. 52 here is going to be 4 times 13. That's 2 times 2. And 13 is prime. And I'm going to have a pair to pull out here. So I'm going to write this as n plus 7 equals plus or minus 2 times the square root of 13. Again, write that out if you need to. The square root of 52 is going to be the square root of 2 times 13. This pair of 2's will come out, the 13 will stay inside. And then now to finish solving for n, I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, and I'm going to get n equals negative 7 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 13, and that is my final answer. Right, so that is how completing the square works. You're basically engineering your way to a perfect square on the left side. So you're going to have to calculate b over 2 squared, add that to both sides, and then factor the left side into a perfect square, and then take the square root of both sides. Hopefully this is helpful. Practice, practice, practice. Figuring out how all of these things work. It's going to take time. It's going to take repetition. Be persistent. Hang in there. Let me know if you have any questions. And again, I changed the due date of homework 3. Instead of being due on Tuesday at midnight, you have until Wednesday, February 1st at midnight to complete homework 3. Please don't put it off. I gave you the extra time because I think it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of time to kind of figure this stuff out. So make sure you give yourself the time to practice. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy factoring and completing the square, and I will see you in class on Wednesday.